there, and welcome to Wrongway's Columbia Cast with me, Brendan Wrongway Corrigan. Now, amidst all the coronavirus news these days, you'd be forgiven for thinking there's very little else happening in the world. In some ways, that's true, but thankfully not totally so. One piece of news that caught our attention came from the Financial Times, where it published, in association with Statista, a ranking of 500 fast-growing companies in the Americas. 31 of those were from Colombia, as many as the rest of Latin America put together. Of those 31, 12 were from Bogota, making it the city with the highest number in Latin America. So while there are caveats to the ranking, for one, it's reliant on companies voluntarily taking part, it does nonetheless paint the Colombian capital in a positive light when it comes to entrepreneurship. Joining me to talk a little more about what, supposedly anyway, makes Bogota attractive for business is Diana Gaviria, the Executive Director of Connect Bogota. Thanks for taking the time to chat with us, Diana. I might have caught you unawares. I think there was a bit of miscommunication, but I appreciate you taking the time.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's very interesting to be here speaking with you in English to an American and British and European audience, and of course, we're always happy to share any information we can about our city and our entrepreneurial ecosystem.
Yeah, well, of course, our audience comes from indeed all over the world. But first of all, can you tell us a little bit about Bogota Connect and what exactly you do?
Well, Bogota Connect is a unique network of organizations, 24 universities, and 30 large corporations and business associations that came together almost 10 years ago to promote, accelerate innovation and entrepreneurship in Bogota. And we're modeled after an organization in San Diego, California called San Diego Connect, which was in many ways responsible for helping San Diego turn around 20 years ago and make it a science and tech hub, which it is right now. So our objective is to make Bogota the most innovative city in Latin America.
You talked about making Bogota more innovative and cutting down maybe on all the red tape that's needed. And the headline in the Financial Times that I mentioned in the introduction, it was Colombia's move to cut red tape pays off for entrepreneurs. Now, from a straw poll I did of foreigners who have opened businesses here in the last 12 months, all of them said it was a pretty straightforward move to open up a business. These were all, I have to say, in the food and beverage sector. But for many people outside of Colombia, and even a good number here in Colombia and in Bogota, that just doesn't seem to make sense. There's a perception that Colombia and Latin America in general is way behind the developed world when it comes to efficient bureaucracy. Is it a case then of money talks, that if you're a foreigner and you have money here, it'll open up? Or what has changed in the years since Bogota Connect came into being?
Well, I'm not quite sure that you can attribute fast-growing companies to red tape, because red tape is just basically the possibility of establishing a business. And I think what the Financial Times might be alluding to is the fact that Colombia, and in particularly Bogota, has made a lot of steps to facilitate opening up businesses. But the Financial Times ranking or analysis of the fastest growing businesses, I think, has to do more with our entrepreneurial spirit. And it has to do more with the fact that there's been a booming entrepreneurial ecosystem in the last 10 years, which accounts for many, many interesting startups coming into the scene, and those that have come into the scene, the possibility of growing fast next to corporates. I think it has to do more with that, and to the fact that many of our companies in Bogota are actually what you would coin in Spanish multilatinas, which means that they've been able to very successfully grow outside of Colombia into the Andean region and into Mexico.
So then what makes Bogota attractive, if we leave the red tape out of it for 1 second? Why are people coming here? Number one, I'm talking from an expat point of view, but locally as well, and what makes it easier perhaps than other cities?
Well, I think undoubtedly Bogota is known for its talent, and talent is the key word for the current and for the future economies. And Bogota has one of the most It has 119 higher education institutions. And so it's very easy to come by very, very good people for reasonable wages. And people are very resilient, creative. And I think it's also very interesting that there's been this whole, because of the growth of many startups such as Rappi and others, like one of the startups that's highlighted in the Financial Times study is Zinobe, which actually is run by a Colombian and a British citizen. And I think what they find is that there's a lot of space for creativity and for innovation to flourish and to find the teams necessary to put these companies not only into operation, but also to grow them fast.
Of course, it's not by chance this has happened. So it's obviously come from government changes and encouraging all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, what's interesting is a lot of people don't know, but I would say that what's happening is that there's a growing collaboration between the private and the public sector in Bogota, which is something unbeknownst to many people. For the last 10 years, we've had the growth of at least 30 or 40 incubators and accelerators. And we've, with the national government, have created a lot of programs to help out different companies, different startups. And I think those are initiatives that are paying off right now.
And I know in that Financial Times article, you gave credit to Juan Manuel Santos for getting the ball rolling in that sense in terms of Bogota and Colombia in general opening up and being more receptive to these kind of businesses. That's continued, I imagine, with Duque and his focus. Does the orange economy link into this as well?
Yes, of course. I mean, what you have to, credit Juan Manuel Santos is for having created a national agency for innovation called Impulsa, and for strengthening the Ministry of Internet and Technologies and Communications with many of their entrepreneurship programs. But then if you add into the equation that for the first time in Colombia's history, perhaps, you have a president like Duque, who not only understands the world of the creative economies and innovation, but is also, he makes all his ministers and cabinet members, actually develop concrete programs in this area. Well, then, of course, that moves things forward. And I think that gives a lot of confidence to international businesses to set up shop. They find this to be a friendly environment. And if you add to that the enormous talent we have and a relative sophistication of businesses and of the markets, a growing middle-class market. I mean, until this COVID situation, we had, a very large growing middle class. And I think that all makes the development of businesses much easier.
Not that I want to get too much into the inequalities in Bogota and in Colombia in general, but of course there are still a lot of inequalities there in terms of financial inequality, and you've the three worlds in one. But I do certainly agree that the middle class, since my time being here, I first came here to live in 2011, you can see, I think, certainly a rising middle class. What happens with coronavirus and the fallout from that, we'll have to wait and see. But would it be true? I know you mentioned obviously a well-educated and industrious local workforce, but has the impulse come more from outside than inside in terms of putting Bogota up in the high rank of being a good place to do business, that it's more outside investment?
Well, I think it's both, actually. We do have one of the highest growing rates of foreign investment in Latin America, as attested to by Invest in Bogota, the investment agency. But I think what you also have is that you have a robust a local business sector who has actually become the platform for growth for many companies in the Andean region and in Mexico. So I think it's a combination of both. And I think the foreign multinational companies find many ways to grow, but I think also there's a local growing scene of businesses and of startups.
Yeah, of course. One thing that you need capital to get things moving, no matter what, where you come from, and no matter what business you're going to set up, and that can be an issue for, especially for locals here, because if you come maybe from the outside with dollars in your back pocket or euros or whatever, it'll go a lot longer here, last a lot longer in Colombia. But for locals on the ground, getting credit is difficult.
It is. It is.
It can be.
It can be. I think we've seen, though, in the last 2 or 3 years that banks are more receptive. And there's been several entrepreneurs that have actually, it's Zinoe for one of the fastest growing ones in the ranking, and is precisely to loan out to people. And so it is very complex. And yet we have a strong financial sector, and I think ups in the fintech scene. And so what that's showing you is that I think both the government and the private sector will be moving in that direction in the current situation.
Yeah, I lost you a little bit there. The connection went out a bit, but I got the gist of what you said. But I mean, and I think maybe you were focusing on this as well, that Bogota as a center in terms of for internet startups and companies like that maybe don't need feet on the ground and bums on seats to go into offices. Like, that is obviously something you'll be looking to create in the years to come, because who knows what the world's going to look like post-COVID, or should we say maybe living with COVID?
Yeah, well, I think if you look at all the recent information coming out, we're seeing an expansion of e-commerce. Colombians in general are very open to the internet and very avid to purchase things on e-commerce. I think that we've seen the growth of fintechs. So yes, we should be expecting a change in scene. And obviously retail, logistics, and fintech will become very important, as well as ed tech. There's a big challenge in ed tech that we need to sort out, especially, as you mentioned, for new populations that don't have access to internet or computers. And so I think what we'll be seeing now is all that creativity put to use so that new businesses and new opportunities come about.
I'm guessing, like anyone, Diana, and especially with the organization you're working with, though, there must be a big fear that coronavirus will completely just wreck all the progress that's been made in the last 10 years, especially for a developing country like Colombia. Are you pretty confident that the measures being taken at the moment will leave Colombia in the next, we'll say, year or 2 years, who knows, but it will come out of it pretty okay?
Well, I don't think anyone can predict what can happen. I think it would be responsible to do so. What we do know is that we're very lucky to have a good president, a good mayor. We're very lucky that they have been trying to do their best to contain the outbreak, that it's relatively well managed compared to some of our neighbors. We do have a very strict fiscal and monetary policies, and obviously the government will have to be investing more to reboot the economy. But one of the things that we've always had, precisely talking about the original question you posed, is that we do have good talent, and fortunately we have good people in the government. And whereas, not everybody in the government maybe has these technical capacities, I think we can say that our leadership in our main cities is relatively qualified, and they should be able to be making the best decisions under these very complex circumstances.
Speaking of Bogota specifically then as well, because obviously in many ways it has some sort of independence, kind of like a semi-autonomous state. Has the arrival of Claudia Lopez as mayor, has things continued as normal, or have you seen changes, whether good or bad?
No. In fact, we've been very happy with Claudia Lopez's emphasis on education, on higher education. She has an excellent secretary of economic development, Carolina Duran, who actually ran a startup accelerator before arriving, and Carolina's team, and in general, very competent people. Claudia chose to be in important posts. So we're very happy that that we've been able to work with her team, and I think they've felt big support. Like, for example, one of the things that we've been working on is an open innovation challenge to help identify best startups, companies, and university solutions in monitoring, tracing, and early detection. And all these types of programs we've been working with Carolina Duran's team. So actually, it's been a good marriage, both with the national government. We work a lot with Impulsa and with the city government. And I think that's one of the keys to that you were asking, well, what's the secret sauce of Bogota's, growing economic development? One is not only the talent, but we also have a lot of solid institutions, private and public, in place that are working together to really help out and open and pave the road to help businesses grow.
Okay. A question maybe, I'm not sure will you be able to answer this, but I'm just curious. For example, and I'll stick to a stereotype here, which is completely hypothetical because the business I'm talking about opening in this current coronavirus crisis will be stupid. But if I wanted to open an Irish pub, I am Irish, what are the steps if you found the place you wanted to open the business, and then what do you go through? Or is that something you can answer?
Well, it's actually quite relatively fast to open up at the Chamber of Commerce, and I think that's one of the red tapes they're saying. I think it now takes about 3 to 5 days to open up a business in Bogota. But of course, setting up a business is more than just signing up to set up a business or establishing an LLC or a small company. It has to do more with the viability, the market validation. And of course, in these times, as you say, well, an Irish pub would be one of the last things that would be opening up. But but if we were in pre-COVID times, I think it would have to do more with how open and interested people would be in your business idea, more than the actual paperwork that it would need to open up.
Well, of course, yeah, but my question more in the point that you said it takes about 3 to 4 days. So, comparably speaking, I mean, I know in some countries, I think, Venezuela probably doesn't even worth mentioning, but other Latin American countries could take up to 20 days to get a business off the ground in terms of the paperwork. So Bogota compares obviously very well in that regard.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, leaving aside an Irish pub, are there other businesses that maybe you feel in your position that Bogota is lacking at the minute, and there are opportunities that are kind of irrelevant to whatever happens with the coronavirus and the fallout, that things that are needed in the city?
Well, why don't we just refer to what is needed now that we have, this situation? I think, anything that has to do with food and beverages, health, psychological treatments, retail, logistics. I think there's a lot of entertainment. I think there'll be a lot of new growing fields, ed tech, that will be needed more so. And basically, I think many companies will have to rethink themselves completely to do so innovatively and find a new way to grow. Of course, it'll be very, very challenging for many companies, and many won't survive. But those that do will be able to do so because they've found new business models and new ways to grow in very creative ways.
I mean, does your organization look after or offer support for all types? I mean, not just maybe the kind of newfangled businesses and people coming from the exterior with great ideas and startups, but like also, for example, because I wrote a story in my blog in El Tiempo about the Barrio Tienda. Now, obviously, they're suffering a lot because they can't have customers inside. So on about new innovative ways, these are businesses that will have to find a new way to survive.
Well, we help out. Like, for example, we're now developing a program with the government of Cundinamarca to help out 120 small businesses develop new products. And that was something that we started before the situation and is still ongoing. But in general, we do not go in and help small and medium businesses unless we're running a government program. Our focus is more to help large corporations innovate And many of the innovation that goes on with large corporations is through open innovation and with relationships with universities and startups. So in that sense, we might find a large corporation that wants to, or needs to have the small tiendas growing. And we might do programs there. But in general, our focus is more on startups, universities, and helping large corporations innovate, and many of them in partnership with others.
Okay, well, we're just linked to that. I found it interesting that in the last few weeks, especially in the barrios populares, a lot of businesses or vacant premises have opened up fruit and veg stores. So that seems to be one area where there's a bit of a demand. It might be the bigger ones just branching out, but a lot of them have sprung up overnight. I'm not sure if you've noticed that in Bogota.
Well, I'm actually not in Bogota right now, but yeah, I can imagine. That's why I said that actually food and beverages is probably going to be the fastest growing segment of our economy in the next year.
Yeah, just to talk about, of course, the other big city in Colombia is Medellin, and there's always this competition between the two. I'm pretty much, because of, well, by virtue of the fact that I've been here since 2011, I'm in the Bogota camp in many ways. But a lot of foreigners and locals too will say that Medellin is far better equipped. It's got better infrastructure. It's got a metro, and of course that's an ongoing debate here for Bogota. So obviously, in your position, you're going to defend Bogota, why it is better than Medellin. Or do you play into that competition thing, or you're just happy to see two thriving cities?
Well, no, I would say that I'm happy to see two thriving cities with very, very different characteristics. Bogota is the capital. It is the largest growing economy. This Financial Times article actually highlights why it is so strong business-wise, having, it's the highest ranking in the Financial Times report. And having said that, Medellin has something that's very wonderful, and that's that their public-private partnership are very solid, and that has allowed to have a lot of institutional arrangements which help it develop and prosper. People are also very entrepreneurial. I would say that it's it's kind of like comparing New York and maybe San Francisco. They're two wonderful cities, very different. Both have a lot of things to draw from.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of apples and pears in that regard, I guess. Yeah, very different. By the way, you said you're not in Bogota now, so are you in the country though?
Yeah, I'm in Cundinamarca, in a municipality near Bogota. Yeah.
And obviously, Bogota Connect works, as you mentioned earlier, too, not just for Bogota, but for the Departamento of Cundinamarca also.
Yes, we work in both. And right now, as I was saying, we have this large project with 120 SMEs all over Cundinamarca, helping them to grow and to thrive in this situation. But we've been working with these 120 SMEs even before the COVID pandemic.
Okay. By the way, just to wrap this up then, if there are people on the outside or abroad listening to this and thinking perhaps of moving to Bogota to set up, or the region, obviously there's a lot of caveats at play here with coronavirus, especially considering flights aren't entering the country. But let's say in a few months' time we get back to something resembling normality and they have business ideas, you would obviously encourage these kind of people to reach out to you?
Yes, of course. And if we can't, I would definitely say to reach out to Invest in Bogota, which is our agency responsible for helping people wanting to come in to set up shop in Colombia and in Bogota in particular. And you can find more information about us in www.connectbogota.org. And yes, we'd love to, especially I know the city of Bogota would love to have more organizations and companies coming in. Obviously, it's a difficult time everywhere. But yes, we hope that the world and the country and the city will be able to open up soon, and that a vaccine will be found, or that will allow us to regain some sense of normalcy. And thanks so much. Very interesting interview. So I hope your your I was going to say readers, but they're not, or your listeners will have found what we do interesting. And if you want to have more information, please reach out to us through our webpage.
Yeah, well, that's the point. That's what we're hoping to do, at least. Anyway, Deanna, pleasure, and thanks for taking the time to talk to us here at Wrong Ways Columbia Cast. If you do want to get in touch with the show, you can contact me via my Facebook page. That's at Wrong Way Corrigan blog, or the Twitter handle WA Corrigan.
It was wonderful speaking with you. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
Okay, all the best, and ciao ciao.
Ciao ciao.